Hello, I'm Lauren, and this is Improving the World. I'm an international improviser based in Hong Kong, and I speak with amazing improv women all over the world. Today, I talk with Katy Schutte. She's a British improviser based in London, and she and I talk about going from stand-up to improv and then bouncing around between and the opposition between the two art forms. I hope you enjoy. So you do many different things, improv in London, and also you travel all over the world, teaching and performing, collaborating. For anyone who's not familiar with the London improv scene, tell me about the Maydays and how you got into performing and working with them.
So I did a drama degree. I moved to Brighton. I found a drop-in class that did improvisation, and I'd done improvisation as part of my theatre training. But this was like, you can do it on stage, which is not something we'd done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the drop-ins, got very excited and looked up, where should I train? Where is the best of this? Which at the time, and according to Google, was Chicago. I spent a couple of summers in Second City and Improv Olympic. And there wasn't really any long form in the UK, so I joined the Maydays and we worked together to create a long form scene in Brighton. And there was a lot of improv in London, but slightly more narrative and more Keith Johnston side. I think we were the first people to do that style of improv in the UK. As a resident company. Yeah.
Do you lean into long form more so than short form, or like a mixed format?
Yeah, I lean into long form. I'm more excited about it. There seems to be more scope, but I'm not snobby about short form. I think I have been. Now I enjoy it. It's like a little treat, and you know it's going to land fairly easy. Am I allowed to say that? Probably not. Short form's really fun, but I don't want to do it all the time because it feels a little bit limited, and it's nice to find new things. It's a bit more risky, but the reward is bigger, just for me. But I love to watch either. Really well done short form is just as much of a treat as really cool long form.
So you are solely improv now, or you do other kinds of comedy or performance?
I did stand-up for a long time, and that's morphed over the years into more of storytelling shows. So still write solo shows. I did sketch for a number of years as well. So there's a couple of shows in the UK. One's called News Review, which has been running for 30 or 50 years. It's this forever show, which is a topical satire. So be writing and creating for those. Quite a lot of different comedy stuff. Now, mostly I'll write my own stuff and perform it. Or at the moment, I do One Woman Alien, which someone else wrote, but they're like, you're a nerd, so you should be in that, which was correct. So.
Do you mean alien like that kind of alien? Okay.
Yeah.
Just checking. So taking the general story we all know and love of Alien and doing it in a single human context, doing all of the character parts? Exactly
right. So it feels a bit like sketch, but also it's a little bit of a TED talk as well, because there's a bit of analysis about the film and stuff. It's very cool. I tend to do a lot of shows that are sort of based on existing IP. I wrote a Ghostbusters musical a few years ago that did 2 Edinburghs and did really well. A nice standing room only kind of fringe, which is the dream.
Yeah.
And and I do a show called Nightmare Live, which only British people know about because it's a choose your own adventure show that we used to watch on TV when we were kids. This massive live stage show that people in their like 30s and 40s are like obsessed with, and they shout stuff and they join in, and it's really cool.
It's interesting that you do stand-up and improv. What I often see is people who are actors or are maybe doing stand-up, and they're looking to expand a little bit their context, their framework, potentially some of their foundations or character work, and they'll come to improv in an exploratory kind of way, them coming into improv versus improvisers going the other way. For you, what was the journey between improv and stand-up?
I pretty much just got the balls to do them both at the same time. So I was maybe like 24, so relative to a lot of people, I'm quite a late starter in both of those things. Not that it matters what age you start any of those things. I set up a new act night in Brighton. All there was to do was new act nights in pubs, so it was quite varied. It was good training, but it was also quite a weird atmosphere to do stand-up in, particularly when you're new and not very good. So I set up a comedy only, new acts and new material night, which I think is still going sort of 15 years later. It's called Rabbit in the Headlights. And about the same time I was doing the Maydays drop-ins and performing short form shows at that time. But there was a point 3 or 4 years in when I felt like to be really good at one or the other, I had to choose. And I don't know if that's true for everyone. Some people seem to be fine with both. There's only so many nights in the week, you know. So it's kind of like stand-up was great, but I'd reached a point where I was having a bit of an ego up and down with it because it feels very personal, and it felt like it would be a lot of work to kind of level up. and I feel like I'd got what I wanted out of it. I'd got a finalist in Funny Women Awards, and I was headlining places, emceeing some of the big venues like local to me and stuff. So that felt good, but I didn't love it in the same way. The improv, I was like, oh my God, I just want to do this all the time. And I felt like if I was sort of 60, 70 years old and I was still at that point, if I hadn't evolved my career for some reason, because not everyone gets a break, even though that's a bit of a myth, I would be happy doing this level of improv, but I would be pretty pissed off if in 10 years I wasn't doing anything else than smallish stand-up gigs.
You mentioned ego. Not to say that stand-up couldn't be a collaborative art form, but for the most part, it's usually one person on stage and it's me trying to entertain the audience with scripted or not material, and I'm trying to be funny. And I tell people to leave funny at the door in improv, that if you want to be funny, you do stand-up, and if you want to be collaborative, you do improv. Do you feel like your time in improv helped with your stand-up, or your time in stand-up helped with improv? And how did you feel about the concept of, you talked about ego, but the individual versus the collaborative or teamwork side of it?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I think I basically completely agree with your thesis, as it were, or what you tell people. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I definitely think there's a lot of crossover in terms of the skill you have with communicating and being aware of an audience. There's a point where you do need an eye on the audience and to know what's working for them, what they're excited about. Not that you have to do everything to please them, but there's a big part of that, obviously. And also emceeing, and a lot of really good improv shows can look really bad just because someone doesn't know how to talk to the audience. It's like, hi, I'm super nervous, and and if they're very charismatic and nervous, it's a winner. But if if you're like, oh God, for that team, then you're going to worry about their work and not enjoy it, which is the same for new stand-ups. For a stand-up, being able to roll with the punches, something changes, or you get heckled, or you've suddenly got a new bit of material just live on stage, that's very cool. And if you're an improviser, being able to be slick and contained and professional kind of around the outside of your work, and to have good stage presence and be heard, and all the basic acting stuff as well is useful.
And what do you think about the competitive nature? Part of stand-up, in much of it, really at its core, is about competition, because you want to be a better stand-up to get either a longer slot, or to get a better time, or to be billed higher, or something like that. And whilst being in an improv group may be about the group being billed higher or getting better times to perform, in and of itself as a core, I think that there's less competition. Or am I wrong about stand-up? I mean, is it more kind of patting each other on the back and that, do a good job than it looks like from the outside?
I can only speak for the era that I was doing it in. And I feel like it's got a bit more collaborative and friendly now. There's just been a different phase just from the friends I know that are still doing stand-up. But I don't know. I still actually do stand-up, but now when I do it, I never do other people's nights. I just do solo shows. So I'll do an hour, and it is more storytelling leaning than joke, which when you have a 5-minute set, it's going to be more like just jokes.
I guess I'm curious about if the competition really is just there. It is what it is, and it's inherent within it, and that's cool. It's what drives it. And for us in improv, the competition is more about like self, like trying to be better than me, versus this idea of trying to be better than someone else. I don't know.
I think you still have that personal best kind of thing in stand-up, right? You're still trying to be as good as or better than your last gig. And I think that's the same in improv, right? Like if you absolutely killed it the other night, you want to make sure that your next improv show is just as good. It is about your team. I think what's lovely about improv is that if you have a shit gig in improv, it's very like, it might be sad, but you're also very collaborative, and maybe it's quite funny that it went wrong, or you know how to fix it at your next rehearsal, or you just get together. We do a circle of awesome, which is just like, oh, let's just remember all the stuff that really did work, the moments that were funny, the characters that were cool, even if the gig was a general fail. But also you move your bar quite a lot for yourself. I wrote this blog recently, which I'll summarize real quick. I did 2 shows in Amsterdam, one of which was a relatively new duo, rom-com duo that I did with my friend Ed. And it was our first longer set. So I think we had like 40 minutes, and we'd only done a 20 before. And we'd been working on like quite a lot of new stuff. And I was kind of nervous about that gig, and it went brilliantly and I was so happy with it. And then I did a Maydays show. We had a sound problem, and it's a musical. Us and the musician couldn't really hear one another. I felt like it was a super hard gig, and Amsterdam's obviously one of the major festivals in Europe. It's huge, it's got a big audience, and I kind of had a really bad time and thought, oh man, I can't believe we've like messed up this gig at a huge international festival. But for a lot of the audience, some people were just saying this is the best improv I've ever seen, and I felt really conflicted about that. I know it sounds like a massive humble brag. That's not why I'm telling the story, but it's very much about where we put our own expectation for ourselves. I knew if we had the music as well, then the show could have been even better. So that was my bar for that show. And the fact that we told a good story and had good characters was like, well, that's cool, but we can do this other thing. So I was disappointed, which is weird because maybe comparatively, probably the Mayday show was better. I don't know, but I enjoyed the other one more. Yeah. It's weird that.
When someone is so intimately involved with the product that you're producing, their feedback versus someone who is less close. I am the hardest on myself about the improv that I do and produce because I know what I can do and I know what I have done and I know what I tried to do. So I'm the hardest because I'm the closest to it. And then my partner, who has seen me perform a bajillion times, will watch a show and be like, I love you. Also, that was okay. Thanks, pal. And then an audience member who's never seen us before, or maybe has never seen improv before, comes up and to your point is like, that wasn't improvised. And for me, that's the biggest compliment when someone thinks that it was scripted. I'm like, huh, thanks very much.
Yeah.
That those levels of intimacy with the product for me really seem to put into perspective how you feel about it and kind of have to take a step back and go, you know what, we never did that show before, we're never going to do it again.
I think to speak to your competitive question as well, I think if you're competitive with the people in your company, it's actually going to mess up your improv. You can heighten someone else's character, mirror them and heighten it, and that's a fun element of competition, or you're using someone else's game. There's a nice interchange. You can build on things and compete in that way. But if you're like, I want to be better than this person in my team on stage, I think that's going to be destructive. Or if you're like, I haven't had enough stage time, I'll just make sure I get stage time, as opposed to what suits the show. So with like stand up and sketch, like you say, what's funny, how do I please the audience, and how do I look good in improv? It's very much, let's be collaborative, let's serve the show. But there are different styles of improv, and some of it is competitive or faux competitive, right? And that's an entertainment in itself. The improviser cannot take that too seriously, then that's fun.
Do you find that you are more picky about who you want to be on stage with because of what you think that they might offer to the table and how you think that you can balance with them? Or do you feel that you are now more ruckus with your decision making? You're like, I'll try anything.
Oddly, I'm a bit of both. So yes, I am picky to some extent about who I play with. If I have the choice, oh, well, then I want to play with these people. But equally, if I'm thrown into a mixer team or something at an international festival, cool, this is exciting. How can we make this successful? I used to hate doing jams, I think because that's like protective thing of my own ego of, oh, I don't want to do a bad scene and I don't want to give someone else a bad scene. I want to be able to support them. And now I'm a bit more like, no, that's part of it, man. We need to be such good improvisers that whoever we're playing with, it's going to be great. My main duo partner, Chris Mead, we're sort of psychic on stage now. So even if for us, we don't do a great show, people are still like, how did you both know this was happening? And we do science fiction, so it can be quite complex and time travel-y and multiverses overlapping, and I don't think I could do that show with everyone. We wouldn't think the same or know each other that well.
Some of the people who for me are potentially the most phenomenal performers, I've seen them do improv and be so terribly witty and capable, I don't feel as safe with on stage, and I don't want to get up with and play as much. But there are other people who, to your point, are more humble. They will just give the energy that needs to be given. Therefore, the final product ends up being more psychic, more intuitive, more interwoven, and can end up being ultimately a beautiful summary of the two of our thoughts. That's what really kind of is that draw.
That makes two incidents spring to mind. One is someone that is an extremely talented improviser who you just made me think like, oh, I don't really want to play with them, but I love to watch them. And I think that because they are incredibly self-contained, So it almost doesn't matter what anyone else does on stage with them.
Yeah.
They've made their own point of view and their own choices, and they're listening and reacting off stuff.
Yeah.
But it's not because of that other person. It's not this beautiful interaction between those people. It's in spite of. So they're great, but I'd happily play with them, but I don't want to. And then there's someone else who's phenomenally funny. Everyone loves them, think they're absolutely amazing. But even when I watch it, I feel a bit uncomfortable for the other players. Jokes are the most important thing, kind of screw everyone else. And in fact, when I did play with this person, they said, oh, I'm going to have to yes and that to something I said. And this is like like kind of A-list improviser person. Yeah. And I found it really hard to get on stage for the rest of the show because I'm so used to quite a hippie, lovely, like everything you do is great and we're super agreement. So I was a bit spun out by it. And it was funny. People really enjoyed it. It's only my ego that suddenly got involved when normally it wouldn't, because it was so meta as well. I felt like it was a comment on me, not on my character. So I was like, oh, and a couple of friends were watching. They were like, you weren't on stage as much. And I was like, oh man, that was noticeable to people that know me.
I think that as we do this, I probably could volley back and forth more stories, but I shall not. I'm suddenly having flashbacks to different instances. Yeah. For me, starting improv in San Francisco Bay Area, and I learned from these entirely capable and phenomenal women. It was really more that let's all get into it together. Perhaps now, to your point, in this protective manner, if anyone wants to do improv to just be funny, I lock into my like, maybe you should just be doing stand-up, sort of thing, because it feels to me rather the antithesis of the intention of why we're all there. From my California, let's all get naked and wear sandals perspective.
Do you know Bill Arnett? He's in Chicago. He has this great point, which I absolutely agree with, which is, as long as everyone knows the style we're playing, then we're good. If we got together and went, we're just going to do a super funny show. Let's be hilarious. Let's do loads of jokes. Yeah. Let's end scenes on gags. If we know to edit after jokes and we know that it's okay to sell each other out for jokes, I think there's a sort of agreement in that. If you're playing in this style, and probably you don't want to do it every day, if that's the agreement, great. That's cool. I think it's just about getting on the same page with what style you want to play. Because if you're trying to do like a slow burn relationship scene and someone else is slamming it with gags, you're both going to feel a bit weird. They're going to be like, where is the scene going? And you're going to feel a bit like, don't shut down my slow burn. If there's agreement, then I think we're okay.
Yeah. Katy, what are your words of wisdom? I mean, not that we haven't said enough already, re-listening people, but if the younger version of you, your peers, or someone who's never tried improv is watching this, what's the takeaway or the words of wisdom?
Definitely younger me has been very judgy. I'll get on one bandwagon and hate another. And I think I've matured out of that for the most part. Embrace all the different styles and schools before you make a judgment about which is the most exciting to watch or be in. Those tools are going to come in useful at some point. If you have a bad teacher, you've learned something about how not to teach badly. Every class, every school, every style that you are inclined to learn from, then do it. Collect as much wisdom as you can, and then you get to choose. Don't just be snobby.
If people want to come and take workshops from you, through the May Days or any of your other offerings, if they want to just generally throw money at you, where can they find you on this internet?
Probably my website's the easiest place with all the infos, and it's Katy Schutte, which is KatySchutte.co.uk. That's generally got all my gigs. It's got blogs there as well. I've written a book called The Improviser's Way, and there's links to that, but also you can find most of that material through my blogs for free if you don't want to buy a book. And the Maydays and all the other companies I work for, there are links to those.
And bonus question, I have a surname where I get to play around and do puns. Do you pun on your second name as well?
Yes, I had a massive list of them on my phone for a while because I was like, all my shows should be called these things. I sometimes challenge comedian friends of mine because shoot, there are so many. My friend Brendan came up with a good one. Shoot, in fish in a barrel. And I was like, that's so weird. I would never have come up with that one.
Like a million of them come to my mind. It's hard to turn off.
Feels like all the pun versions of my name would all be different genres. Shoot the messenger. Oh, I'm religious. I have shows for eons.
Katy, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you all. This is Improving the World. I'm Lauren. Bye. So, did you love the video? If you did, please say kind and beautiful things down below and look for more Improving the World. Thanks.